Well, welcome everybody to Coffee with Common Cause. I'm Catherine Terser with Common Cause Ohio. What we're going to do is we're going to go through some different topics. A number of you reached out with things that you wanted to talk about in more depth. There's a ton happening at the national level, of course, and then we also have, especially because of the budget, lots of things going on here in Ohio. And so we'll go through a variety of topics. So here's the basic agenda. We're going to talk about Senate Bill 153. So this has to do with election administration and voting. And this bill is fairly problematic. We'll talk about ranked choice voting and the attack on it at the State House. We'll discuss Article 5. There was a hearing just this week, and so we'll talk about that. We're going to go through some of the rallies and talk about the upcoming No Kings rally on June 14th. We'll talk about the National People's Promise, and then I also wanted to highlight, the upcoming events and things that we can do together and ways to take action. What I'm going to do when we get started is I'm going to throw into the chat links to, it's a document that has links and resources, but you'll also get a follow-up document. It'll come in an email, and you'll have, because there's a lot, we'll make sure that we figure out different ways to get it to you so that it won't just be in the email. So make sure you look through for where you can click to go and see more detailed information. And a big welcome to you all. And with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Kelly Dufour, who is our voting and elections manager. Kelly?
Good morning, everyone. I am going to kick us off with some updates on voting and elections. So we'll start with Senate Bill 153, which again, there's Senate Bill 153 and then the House Bill, the companion 233, which are giant 200 plus page bills, just looking to just completely overhaul the, election administration and election systems. And so, thankfully, we are still on standby for Senate Bill 153's next hearing. We are watching that, and we will alert everyone as soon as we know more. But, to remind you, this generally is being touted as, the documentary proof of citizenship bill, but lawmakers have thrown all sorts of things in there. If that wasn't bad enough, it disenfranchises voters in so many additional ways. So it scrutinizes the voter rolls of just who can be even registered and how that's all processed, and creates a lot of preemptive work for the boards to manage that. It creates possible situations of prosecution if you fail to reply to confirmation emails. It explodes provisional ballots with you can be placed on provisional status if you have a mismatch of of some of your information from the BMV, or they're all bad, so I can't really rank them. But another situation is if you show up to vote and you don't have your ID and you vote provisionally, but you're not able to cure that, you're just removed from the voter rolls. So many dozens of ways that it disenfranchises voters, but it's also an unfunded mandate for the boards of elections. There's no financial support to do any of this work. There's no understanding of how any of this work would be done. In a separate bucket of horribleness, it also attacks the petition process. So it increases legal concerns for those who serve on petition committees, initiative committees, and our petition circulators. It creates a badge process if you're compensated, but loosely defines what compensated means. So volunteers could be rolled up into that problem. It also increases ways that petitions can be thrown out, requiring a whole host of other requirements for who can sign and how it's signed and how it's processed. So really, on every front of this bill, we find it highly problematic for Ohioans. We've included one pager, a summary that you can read more about, how we and the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition are messaging this. We've also included a link for op-eds and letters to the editor that other advocates, have done around the state. Next slide, please. This past week, we have grown a new group of coalition of over 130 at this point, organizations who have signed on to an open letter, really trying to point out how how awful this is for Ohioans in particular to their, the right that we have to our direct democracy. So again, we were very successful in 2023, and we're seeing the effect of that play out with them trying to really lock down that process and create barriers for us to take things to the ballot. So next slide. So if you are out and about or talking with friends or sharing on social media, I just want to remind you, we're really trying to emphasize that they slow down. It's a huge overhaul. They need time to really implement all of the other election bills that have been passed. There's been a handful of those in the past couple of years that boards of elections are really just trying to uh, get implemented correctly. Again, it's much more than just documentary proof of citizenship. It attacks the direct democracy. It brings the threat of prosecution to voters. Really, actually, you don't have to vote. You can just be on the rolls and be investigated, and disenfranchise eligible voters in so many ways. We know our boards of elections are already, overburdened with new changes and new requirements that they need to fulfill, and so the unfunded mandates in this are just hugely problematic in so many ways. Next slide. We have half a dozen ways that you can engage and take action to help us stop this. We have a social media toolkit, and I know Catherine's already provided the link for the resources. That's all in one place. So there's a social media toolkit if you're on social media for throwing some graphics out there to your network. You can sign the petition to protect direct democracy. We now have now have it for individuals that are interested in signing on. That is a new step this week. There are actions to email your senator and Governor DeWine. You can log your calls if you're able to call them. And then we have a link here where you can sign up and testify or submit written testimony on this. And we're encouraging you, if you're interested, to sign up there, because then you will receive, the most up-to-date updates we can get you as soon as we hear anything from the committee. We have toolkits, and if you'd like help creating a letter to the editor or reaching out to your community in some other way, you can contact us. And again, I put the examples of the letters to the editors of other advocates around the state. So it is a big bill. It's very complicated. There's a lot in there deliberately. And so, hopefully we've given you some tools to help us fight back on it. Next.
And I'm just going to jump in and say, if you have signed up to testify, thank you so much. Many, many people have. And what we're doing is waiting until 5 p.m. on Friday, and by which time we should know if the committee is planning to hold a hearing or not. We will get a notification. So as soon as we find out if they will or will not have a hearing next week, we will email everybody who has signed up to testify to let you know whether we're waiting again or whether it's time to submit the testimony. And we will send you in an email the link that you need to submit that testimony once the hearing is called.
Right. And, it can be a twofer. So if you write your testimony and you want to take it next step, you can turn that into a letter to the editor. And we have the resources in the toolkit with the local media outlets and, the steps for a couple hundred words. And, that's another effective way to reach out to the community and share, how horrible we believe this bill is. There's a question in the chat about, is there a type of testimony that's most helpful? Actually, this bill is so giant that, there are so many different ways to tackle testimony that, it's really up to you and the perspective you're bringing. So we encourage you to take a look at the one pager for the messaging and have a general sense of what our coalition is recommending. But, there are some testimonies that are planning to just really hone in on one specific area. And then there are some that are just, much broader than that in terms of just the attack on democracy in general. So we welcome all opinions on this bill. Okay, and then there are other bills. Oh, and I guess I should say with 153, we are also watching it in the budget, and so at any time we know things can be thrown in that budget and be fast tracked, and so we're watching for parts or hopefully, not all of that, but, we are hearing that there is interest for, this to move forward. So we're watching it on all fronts. There's also Senate Bill 63, that we're keeping an eye on. So this is the ranked choice voting ban. Last week it passed the Ohio Senate. Yesterday it was referred to the House General Government Committee, and it bans the use of ranked choice voting at the state level, but then it also penalizes localities if they want to use it. If they want to use it in local elections. Problematic, kind of. Frustrating, another frustrating bill. And so, it appears that it's being rushed through the process, really to just intimidate and, frustrate the several Ohio cities that are, considering to use it as an option, that have local initiatives for ranked choice voting. So, again, it's just another little, I don't know, poke at elections and making it problematic for folks to have options and have their options for elections. We do have a sign on with Rank the Vote Ohio, and there is an action that you can take there. We threw a link in there so you can learn more about it if you're interested. But that's also happening now over there will be House hearings on that. Thanks. I think I have some general election news. We did have an election. One of the problems with all these election bills is that there are continual elections happening, and our boards of elections have been quite busy. There was the May election results. There's some links in our document that you'll be able to check out. We have unofficial results. The boards of elections are still moving through that process. Certification is next week by the 27th. One of the things that is new, and we do see as I guess a step in the right direction, is new data dashboards that are on the Secretary of State's website. So there is information that you can see for absentee and early voting dashboards. There's the official results that go back for quite a bit of time, but you can break them down pretty easily. And so they are working toward making some of the data gathering and assimilation a little bit more efficient and interpretable, I guess, for us. Audits are now required for every election. So this became effective in April with House Bill 74. And so all boards of elections are required to do audits after each election. So that will be the next step after Tuesday. They'll go through and take a sampling and check the accuracy of their work. So we have, that bucket of work going on in Ohio. Some of you may remember last time we met, we were talking about the SAVE Act, and that was moving quickly. That thankfully has stalled in the Senate. There's information in a link to, a couple articles that you can read there, but for the time being, we're able to pause on that, that very destructive bill. Next slide. I think that might be it. It might be time for Catherine to talk about the budget, which is even more complicated.
Well, and I was going to say, Wenda had a question about the online voter registration.
Sorry. When does your summary say, including banning online?
So basically, it has to do with the banning online voter registration. It does include it, but it doesn't include it in a way that works.
Right. So there are a lot of unknowns in that bill right now. And so there are things that we think, are not even logistically possible for boards of elections to administer. But we know that, it is attacking the process on multiple points. And so, for example, we know that you can work through a transaction at the BMV, for example, online, and work through online registration in that sense. And so we believe that that is a way that you can still, when they say register to vote online, you would be doing it through a BMV transaction, but we are unclear on how it would work on the Secretary of State's website. Information is available there, but somebody needs in-person documentary proof of citizenship. So unless someone is there on the Secretary of State's website, similar to the BMV, helping to actually prove that documentation, we're not exactly sure how it's viable.
Okay, we can talk later about that.
Sure.
Again, but I've read the bill and I'm very concerned about anybody who writes a letter to the editor saying that online registration is banned. It'd be
Okay.
better to say that it is made more difficult.
Yeah.
And as a voting location manager, I well know that people bring their documentation to the polling place. And I believe it would be the same way that you bring it to the polling place, unless, Catherine, I missed something about how you have to mail it in advance of the election. I didn't see that. But thank you.
Okay, thanks, Wanda. Yeah, we have seen your email, and I know we were talking, or we were chatting back and forth online, and so I will reach out to you, to learn more about the specifics. And so, it may just be, an oversight with our coalition messaging. We can look at that and, definitely clarify, because we don't want to mislead people. Again, there's just so much in there that, we feel is problematic, and so we know there will definitely be limitations, but some of it we can't even predict how bad it could be yet.
And I think even if it were to be a case of, well, you've registered, but you haven't proved your citizenship yet, so you bring a document to the when you go to vote, as with the SAVE Act, when you put the burden on the people who are working at the Board of Elections to decide what is or isn't valid proof of citizenship, that creates another can of worms as well, in terms of them having to make those decisions. But yes, let's figure it out later. But I agree with you that it's important that we don't say ban. Catherine.
I got distracted. Alyssa has a puppy. I know.
Molly.
I always like
This
these
is
these coffees.
Molly. She's trying to get into
Oh,
trouble. She has many things to chew on, but she wants to chew on the microphone stand.
well, there we go. All right. Well, moving on to something that we know is bad. I know this is something that we talked about last time, but I just think it's incredibly important to take action at this point about the $600 million bond for the new Brown Stadium. We'll say $600 million bond, but of course, bonds are not magic money. We actually have to pay the bond back. It'll be $1 billion over 30 years. That's $1 billion from taxpayers to a guy who's already a billionaire. This is a for-profit company. In many ways, this is very similar to the bailouts of First Energy, the House Bill 6, where a politically connected corporation is wanting our money, and it's not ratepayer money, it's taxpayer money. But it is genuinely problematic. I highly encourage you to send an email to your legislators, to Governor DeWine, and also in the doc that I've shared a couple different times, and I'll do it right now as well. There's also, if you want to make a phone call, there's some talking points and phone numbers and folks to call. I noticed that Denise said the Bengals are working on the same thing. This is the other thing. When you start to do, what we can best describe as corporate welfare, of course, the next thing that'll happen is other sports teams will want that as well. I noticed that Michael was highlighting, the folks that are out there really leading the charge, and that includes the county executive. I just think we really need to be supportive of those people who are pushing back. And this is one of those things. Let's get out in front of it. We just managed to get rid of the last remnants of House Bill 6. So I highly encourage all of us to take some action. And then, I think it's important to remember, we spent last year really focused on addressing gerrymandering. And if you need some fire in your belly to get you to make a phone call, because I hate making phone calls to people I don't know. If you need a little fire in your belly, the Haslams contributed $100,000 to stop us from actually establishing fair districts and participating in fair elections. And with that, I will send us to the next slide.
Sorry.
Not to worry. So the budget is continuing to work its way along the process. Right now, it's in the Ohio Senate, and there are some things to be paying attention to as the Senate considers their version. So you'll remember it needs to be passed by the very end of June. Generally, what happens is the House version and the Senate version are distinctly different. So right now they're working on the Senate version. And so this is a real time to look at the things that are really problematic in the House version. One, they've eliminated funding for the Ohio Elections Commission. And they've left the work of essentially enforcing campaign finance disclosure rules to the Secretary of State and to the boards of elections. Boards of elections, I mean, it's an enormous undertaking, and the Secretary of State has come out opposed. He's proposed some reforms to improve the process. Some of them, just make really good sense. More experience for some of the members of the commission, and other things like that. Other ones we'd be like, okay, I think we should be. He's wanting to focus on things beyond election administration, essentially some of what he would call voter fraud. And so that doesn't make sense. But what is clear is that it doesn't make sense just to eliminate the funding in the budget. We need a very thoughtful process to address the Ohio Elections Commission. And we need to remember one of the reasons the Election Commission is so toothless is we don't have good disclosure rules. We have dark, secret money in our elections, not because of the Ohio Elections Commission, but because our legislators have failed to act and shine a light on all the money in Ohio elections. And then the budget bill also includes elimination of the elected roles, or so the members that were elected to the state school board, essentially leaving us just with the folks that are appointed by the governor. You'll remember those roles were added to depoliticize and to create a greater connection to the state school board so that folks would have an opportunity to weigh in. And as opposed to having, hearings about it, they just eliminated those elected roles. Speaking of elections, there's also the election of coroners that's been eliminated. And most of us can say, well, should I elect a coroner? Maybe how do you identify who's better? But of course, this is the kind of change that the coroners didn't know about in advance. And it makes sense to do this as a separate legislation. And so, you'll find in the doc I've shared a number of times just because people have been kind of entering, you'll find ways to promote, adequate funding and some good education policies in that doc as well. There's just a lot going on. And so if there's something that you really care about, if you're somebody who cares a lot about money in politics, this is a really good time to send a letter, to make a phone call about the Ohio Elections Commission. Mia, Kelly, anything you wanted to add?
Sorry, it clicked on a link. Give me a second.
Oh, it's easy peasy for that to happen, isn't it?
You get all those links in the document, and then you end up clicking on one of them by mistake.
And, Carol just said flooding the zone. I think one of the things that is really challenging with the budget is, of course, it's a policy document because of what we spend our money on is what we prioritize. What we don't spend our money on also highlights what the state government believes we shouldn't, care about or prioritize. And so that what can happen so often with those bills is they just become enormous Christmas tree bills. They just everything that people want can end up in that, primarily because it's required to be passed by June 30th. It's in the Ohio Constitution, and that's why that can happen. And then Mia, if you want to move to Article 5, and with the deep breath, I think it's also important to realize that, Article 5 is one of the ways where we could call a constitutional convention to address the challenges of federal government. And I don't know about you right now. I'm imagining each and every one of us as being a founding father or mother as part of a constitutional convention. And I can understand why folks got frustrated and have been proposing it. But we are living in a time period where things are so up in the air. And Mia, if you'll move to the next slide, um, I'll go over what's happening in both chambers. I think what's important here is that Article 5 is very short. It doesn't include any parameters for a constitutional convention. We have no way of confirming. They wouldn't change the rules for how things are affirmed or how things are set up into the US Constitution, because they could cover anything that basically has to do with the purse strings. They could connect it to a variety of other areas in the Ohio Constitution. And so it could, it could impact some really important rights. I often think the folks that are the most concerned about this are worried about all of the spending that is done by the federal government, but they're also very focused on term limits for Congress. Some of you remember in 1992, Ohioans passed term limits for Congress, but that was found to be unconstitutional. We retain them from the Ohio Constitution, but not from the US Constitution. And, folks have continued to see term limits as a way to kind of reduce power and create new blood in Congress. And certainly a lot of us have thought about, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be, some new blood there would make good sense. I think the challenge is we are living with the consequences of term limits at the state house. And what we know is when there are fewer veterans, there are, more power is given, to the lobbyists, more power is given to the wealthy. It's a weird confluence of money because, of course they need to get elected. They're eyeing their next job, and not having enough experience to push back on nonsense. And so we know that term limits aren't great. In the Ohio House, we had a hearing just this week. I think what's important about that is the next step is opponent testimony. It's the same thing when it comes to in the Senate. The next step will be opponent testimony. And so as y'all are thinking about taking action, one, I'd encourage you to send an email pushing back on Article 5. I was going to say, Kelly, did you want to share anything about the hearing, the House hearing that they just had?
Well, I listened to the half dozen or so proponent testimonies, and they are very, I'll say, firm in their convictions. They refer to organizations like ours as what was it? Historical hobbyists, and through Common Cause in there, because Common Cause nationally is one of the leaders, if not the leader, fighting back on this specific effort. And so, we saw in February, it was on the Senate side, and Rick Santorum showed up and, and did his little dog and pony show. But then, we had quite a few proponents this time. So there were half a dozen that spoke, and then over 80 some that submitted written testimony. So they have coalesced around this, and they're really working toward it, because we do know, Ohio is one of those states that has not moved on this issue, knocking on some wood right now. And, we just really, and this is just another, we're going to stand by and alert everyone when we hear more, but definitely something that we want to keep on our radar. And there are also bills that I'll say complementary bills that include what the appointments would be like. So, they have taken that next step, not only to create the resolution to have that convention, but then to also try and figure out who they would appoint and how that would work. And so a little bit more effort into the thought of, what would happen next. So, which is also problematic. Definitely something we want to keep our eye on.
Well, and I was very interested in the Senate hearing, which, Mia, if you'll go to the next slide. One of the things that was promoted is that the members of this Article 5 convention could consider elimination of the direct election of US senators. So as we think about the kinds of things that the folks that are promoting this are interested in, it's kind of shocking. It's kind of shocking. Now, obviously, we're in a super contentious time right now. It's hard to imagine a convention where even the most faithful and thoughtful would manage to come up with good changes. And of course, we have a process for amending the US Constitution. We can actually go through and work with US Congress to actually get this done. So I highly encourage us not just to be thinking about kind of the election administration like Kelly was talking about, but also to be thinking about defending the US Constitution. And I've been sharing kind of the docs throughout. We'll get some follow-up on ways to take action in this area. It's just there's so many threats right now. But this is a big one. And then Mia, if you're willing to go to the next slide. I also wanted to highlight this recent Ohio Supreme Court decision. So on May 7th, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled against a widow receiving additional death benefits. The Industrial Commission of Ohio allows someone who's harmed to seek additional benefits. Often we're talking about millions of dollars if a company was negligent. In this particular case, this man worked at the Timken plant. He was a security guard. He went into an area where there was nitrogen gas, and he ended up, he wasn't given anything to cover his mouth or whatever, to make him safe. He walked in and just within minutes died. Just incredibly sad. And the state highest court essentially didn't find that nitrogen gas is a poison or is toxic. And that means that the company is not going to be held liable for their negligence. And, many of you will remember the, boneless chicken wing decision where, the Ohio Supreme Court said that boneless chicken is a cooking method and that we should expect bones in our chicken, which makes you anxious every time you give nuggets to your, to the babies in your life, right? One of the things that's very clear is the Ohio Supreme Court is playing a bunch of word games. And it's actually very scary to have a court that is so anti-consumer. And so Mia, if you'll move to the next slide.
Just to say that because nitrogen exists in the air, somehow that means that nitrogen gas isn't poisonous, which is just the most incredibly absurd thing. On the face of it, absurd. Anything toxic, if you take it down to its atoms, those atoms exist in a harmless form in our world. So it's completely silly. Anyway, next slide.
Well, and it's horrifying to think that nitrogen gas is actually used, to institute death penalty cases in some states. So it is the poison is in the dose, is how Alyssa put it. So I did want to highlight, some context here. Many of you were probably already like, okay, well, wait a second. What is the corporation? And the corporation, of course, was the Timken Company. So many of you will remember in 2011, when the congressional district lines were moved so that Jim Renacci was able to include the Timken plant. They called it the Timken Peninsula. So Team Boehner, so this is John Boehner, the speaker at the time. Tom Watman was the person that worked with the Ohio map makers. He wrote in an email in basically September of 2011. He said, guys, really, really sorry to ask, but can you do a small carve out down 77 in Canton and put Timken in the 16th, or the 16th congressional district? And then, thanks, guys. Very important to someone important to us all. I went back and I kind of was like, as I was putting this together, and I went back and I found, in October of 2011, a story at the Canton Repository where I said, well, all you have to do is connect the dots. So this is before we had the public records. All you had to do is connect the dots to know that they were doing this specifically for a major donor, someone who was very politically connected. Now, of course, Jane Timken, for many years, was the head of the Ohio Republican Party. She's currently serving on the Ohio Senate. And then the Timken family has given over time major donations to members of the Ohio Supreme Court. Just recently, so 2019 through 2024, so last kind of 4 years, it gave $30,700 to folks who heard the case. And I think that's the other thing, as we think about the Ohio Supreme Court, we don't have decent recusal rules so that members on the Ohio Supreme Court are hearing the cases of their contributors. And of course, people who are spending money to get folks on the court, often they want them there so that they themselves will benefit, or they will have a pro-business, anti-consumer court.
Sigh.
Yeah, well, I think, one of the things that's really hard is, I was all growly about the weather being kind of gray. But the world is pretty gray right now.
I think the angle that we're trying to come at here for the stadium and for the Supreme Court and this is just corruption, people. It's corruption. It's pay to play. And, we're, as Catherine mentioned, we're finally getting rid of the subsidies that were put in place by HB6, for coal plants in Ohio and Indiana. And yet we're still doing the same thing, and we're allowing, rich people to pay to get stuff that benefits them from the state house, and it's depressing. So we want to call attention to it and really make sure people know what's happening.
Did you notice that Denise in the chat said the kids use Ohio as slang for cringe? Yup. So on to the next slide, because there's more. I did want to highlight this one. I don't know how many of you are up in Cuyahoga County. I have been really moved when I see these, this type of protest. Cuyahoga Valley National Park now with reduced staff. And Mia, are more billboards are coming? I love it. I love it. And then on to the next slide. I did want to highlight the People's Promise. So Common Cause got together with the Southern Poverty Law Center, the NAACP, and LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens, to come up with this idea that we need to make it really clear that we deserve better. We're pushing back on the bad stuff, but what we want is to be clear, these are the good things that we want. We want a livable economy. We want a government that is functional and works for all of us, not just the very wealthy. We want equal protection under the law, and we want freedom from discrimination. And so, the People's Promise at this point includes, these four major organizations, but others as well that have come on to the People's Promise, because it's not enough just to push back under on bad stuff. We also need to be sure that we have a vision for what we want, which is a government that works for all of us, a democracy that works for all of us. We deserve that, and we need to hold on to what's good, or we're going to just be slowly boiled by all the crazy. Anything you wanted to add, Mia or Kelly? Well, on that note, I think I'm handing it off to Mia.
Yes. So I just wanted to say the counterbalance to all of this depressing stuff about our government is what we all are doing, what you all are doing. There are so many activists out there. I know that I'm speaking to many, many of them who are doing great things when it comes to protesting, rallying, doing smart things to call attention to bad things. There were, I believe, 16 rallies across the state on May 10th that under the heading of Mothers and Others Standing Against Fascism, Not on Our Watch, including one in Columbus. And so, that was it's good to be out there and to talk about what's happening. And I know a lot of people were doing this, all across the state. The next big nationwide event is on June 14th. The reason for June 14th is it's the day that Trump is throwing himself a military parade for his birthday, which is, absurd. You can go to, actually, if you go, I will pop in the chat. If you go to nokings.org, you can find, sorry, that was no space there, nokings.org. You can look up where there's a rally near you. There's going to be many, many all across Ohio. You can host your own rally, even if you are just, you and 5 friends holding signs at a busy intersection. It's great to have, as many different rallies and events as possible all across the state. Now, June is Pride Month, and there are many Pride events happening on June 14th, including one in Columbus. And so in Columbus, Common Cause and Indivisible Central Ohio are going to be marching in the Pride Parade with a No Kings float. We are still working out the details, but we are encouraging folks to sign up. I'll make sure that I send the link to sign up in the follow-up. But again, you can find it by going to the nokings.org and looking at the map and finding the Columbus event or the whatever event is closest to you. Trump is not our king. He's enacting incredibly harmful policies to everybody, but particularly to the LGBTQ community. So it makes sense to have Pride be a focus of protest against this wannabe king. No King Donald, no kings in the White House, no kings, no tyrants, no bullies, no despots, no billionaires taking over our country. So we really hope that you find a rally or host a rally. There are also going to be veterans rallies on June 6th. There's a link that I'm going to pop in the chat right now that is uniteforveterans.org. And you can find your event closest to you there. And I heard a mention of Michelle Reynolds earlier about the Article 5 convention. A lot of folks are doing town halls with or without their representatives. Actually, this evening, there is a town hall. Michelle Reynolds, it's for Michelle Reynolds' district and specifically about school funding, public school funding. She has said that she is attending, although her staff have also said that she's not attending. So she's being a little bit yeah, unclear about that. But there are, these town hall activities are happening across the state as well. So if I will make sure that goes out in the follow-up, or if you are interested, if you're in Michelle Reynolds, Ohio Senate District, District 3, let me know and make sure I can send you that information. So that is this evening. And then there's a town hall on May 31st for the Ohio's 15th congressional district. That's Mike Carey. He's been invited. He has not indicated that he's coming. But these kinds of town halls, empty chair town halls, or, the folks are invited, they're welcome to come. They're opportunities for constituents to get together and talk about the issues that really concern them that are being ignored by their elected representatives. So I encourage you to attend those, to hold those, to get involved with the groups near you. We wanted to mention, I think we mentioned at the last coffee that there was this HBO documentary about HB6 and the dark money game in Ohio. And we just wanted to add that we have a sign up now. If you want to help organize a screening in your part of Ohio, please go ahead and sign up. That link will be in the follow-up document, and we can try to help you organize a screening of the documentary in your part of Ohio. And more information. I'm just rolling through all the different things here. I think folks know about SB1, which was the, we call it the Ohio Educational Destruction Act, that was passed, signed into law in March by Governor DeWine. There is a referendum effort. It is a truly grassroots effort. It's a big hill to climb, but it's exciting that people are getting activated and motivated and, organized to try to overturn this bill. So we have included some links where you can sign, where you can donate, how to sign up to volunteer, look at the website, get on their Substack. All of these links will be in the follow-up, and we highly encourage you to get involved. If you happen to be in the city of Columbus, there is a very, very worthwhile petition effort happening in Columbus that's called the Columbus Safety Collective campaign. It has to do with establishing a non-police emergency response team that would be available 24/7, that would be safer for everybody than sending police to situations where there's a mental health crisis or something of that nature. These folks need to collect, they're aiming to collect 50,000 signatures by the end of June. Again, the grassroots help is really, really needed. If you've collected signatures before, if you're a pro, if you've collected for repro, if you've collected for redistricting, we'd love to get you out there and signed up to help. So please, contact these folks. I'll make sure there's some more information in the follow-up about who you can contact. Yes, lots of ways to engage. And this is a positive thing. It's just good to be doing some of the positive things, having an impact on your community. Once this gets on the ballot, I think there's no reason to believe it wouldn't pass. So it's something that it's attainable. We can do it. We just need to get the signatures. So we hope folks join us and get the signatures. We wanted to just give you a few things that are coming up. Again, tonight there's a town hall with with or without Michelle Reynolds, and I will add that info. NATO is holding a parliamentary session this week. It started yesterday for a week in Dayton to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Accords, which ended the war in Bosnia. So the world is looking at Dayton, Ohio this week. And in response, the folks in Dayton there is a protest on Saturday. It's basically all day from 10 to 6, and you can come for whatever period of time you want with your signs, just to show the world that, yes, we're in America. Yes, we're in Ohio. Yes, we're in Dayton, but we know what this guy is doing. We are not fooled by Donald Trump. We know how bad he is for us and for the world. And, the quantity of amazing, creative, articulate, pointed funny signs I have seen since January. Can you imagine them all there in Dayton with the world press on them? I think it would really make an impact. So I very much encourage you to make a day trip to Dayton this weekend. Just show up for a couple of hours. There's a specific protest zone that's been kind of roped off. So, it's all, there's no need to worry about any conflict or anything like that. We have every other week, we have a Ohio Voter Rights Coalition meeting on Fridays at noon. The next one's coming up on May 30th. We have a huddle on June 11th, and we're going to be having Kate Donovan from the Redistricting Data Hub joining us to talk about redistricting that's going on nationally. The June 14th No Kings events we mentioned. Our next Coffee with Common Cause is June 19th. We brought it a week early because we didn't want two events on the same day, because we have an event on June 26th at 6 p.m., Threats to the Rule of Law and What You Can Do About It, featuring civil rights attorney Subodh Chandra. So we hope you all join us for that. That should be really interesting. And then we wanted to give you a heads up about our second annual in-person Election Protection Summit that's going to be on September 20th. We had a great time last year. A lot of folks that do election protection came together. We heard from people from boards of elections and all kinds of people who are involved with the election protection process. We distributed a lot of materials. We had a delicious lunch, and we're hoping to do that again this time. So that is, I believe, our last slide. And I'm going to quickly look through the chat and see if there's anything need to jump at. I like that Athens one. That looks awesome.
Well, and I highly recommend the June 26th event with Subodh Chandra. I just think he's amazing. And this is a real opportunity to ask all sorts of different questions. It'll be fairly informal, so please join us. And this is intended for all of us, and especially the non-lawyers. Well, there I see all your faces. There we go. So once again, I'm just really glad that we were able to get together. It would be lovely to do an in-person coffee with Common Cause. So if you are somebody who would like to work with me to organize a coffee with Common Cause in your neck of the woods, I would love to, we would love to do a road trip, come visit you and talk with the community about all the things that are going on and actually have a cup of coffee or, well, maybe some tea.
I see Karen Lee here, and maybe she may in fact be in Greece. If she is, then we definitely agree to come and have a coffee with Common Cause in your neck of the woods. No doubt about it.
You would be most welcome. Bring
Very
signs.
good.
We'll meet in Monosiraki and hold them up.
All right, let's do it.
By the way, Mia, that Trump balloon was over in the UK, or one just like it was in the UK during his first term, when he walked in front of the Queen and did other presentations. That's a motif that's been around a while.
Yes, there's a huge balloon, and it has him in a diaper because he's just a baby. He's a very harmful baby. We want to remind you that we will be sending out a recording, the links, all sorts of good follow-ups. And of course, if you have more questions, you're welcome to ask. Ronald, I see your hand up.
I just wanted to share with you that I'm going to be meeting with Dr. Amy Acton in a couple of weeks. She's going to be in Akron. And I'm offering her a campaign issue, which I think is a issue that will resonate widely, which is the plight of boys. This is something that's kind of on the national radar screen these days. And Dr. Acton did 2 pediatric residencies, even though she's a public health doc. She's uniquely qualified, and I'm a clinical psychologist who focuses on the psychology of boys and men. So I have a lot of data to share with her. I'm not a politician, but I can provide the raw material and she can craft it in messages. I know she's going to have other issues, but I was just delighted that she asked to meet with me, and I'm going to do my best to give her a good campaign issue.
Very good. Nice to hear.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Catherine?
Well, and I want to encourage everybody when we put this together, you'll notice so many different topics. And that is in part because they're topics that you have raised. You'll also notice there are things that we just didn't get to. So please, send me an email. Let me know, if there are things that you'd like us to cover next time, if there are things you'd like to do in a little more in depth. We want these Coffee with Common Causes to be informative, help you figure out ways to take action, but also to be sure to hit on topics that you care the most about. And with that, I'm going to throw my email into the chat. Any final words from you, Mia?
No, just thank you so much for being here. We look forward to these. We will send something out to you shortly, and we'll see you again on June 19th. Kelly?
Thanks, everyone. I hope everyone has a great day. It's always good to see you.
And a great
Take care,
holiday
everybody.
weekend.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.